Alrighty. Thank you everyone for joining us at this next session of the Connecticut Affordable Housing Conference. We super appreciate you being here if you were here with us yesterday, but if you're joining us for the first time today, also welcome. We've got a whole set of great sessions. We had some great ones this morning. You are here for a really awesome conversation now, and there's still another round of conversations after this one, so we hope you'll tune in for that as well. This year, the conference is focused on thriving communities, and each session spotlights a unique approach to strengthening housing stability for households and communities across Connecticut. Please be a part of the conversation. Since we are fully virtual this year, our conversation happens predominantly online. So you can see our hashtag and our different social media. Please tag us. Please make this conversation expand beyond just this virtual space we're all sharing here today. My name is Danielle Hughley. I manage advocacy and education with the Partnership for Strong Communities. I also have our lovely and wonderful intern, Emily Luck, with us today. And we will be here to help support you. If you have any tech issues or you have any questions during the session, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But first and foremost, you have found yourself today at breakout session 4.2, focusing on parents leading in housing policy and what it's like to build your own table. A really exciting conversation, as I said before. Before I pass it over for them to engage you in this wonderful conversation, I just have to thank our sponsors. Our leading sponsor is the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority. We also have our visionary sponsors with the Connecticut Department of Housing and Wells Fargo. Our champion sponsors, Bank of America, J.D. Amelia Associates, M&T Bank, Webster Bank, and the Melville Charitable Trust. And our foundation sponsors, Federal Home Loan, Bank of Boston, Cohen Resnick, and Trinity Financial. Thank you so much to all of these sponsors. Without their support, this conference wouldn't be happening in the way that it is. It is free, it is virtual, and it is accessible to as many people as possible because of all of their support. We also have Glendower supporting today's session in particular, so thank you so much for your support and to bringing this conference to as many people as possible. A few quick items of housekeeping before I turn it over. First and foremost, the session is being recorded. All recordings will be available on our YouTube channel as soon as we're able to get them up there following the conference, so anything you might have missed, you can find there. You have all entered muted. Please stay on mute unless our panelists ask you to unmute yourself. That is at their discretion, so please be mindful of that. If you have any tech issues, like I said, there is a chat icon in your Zoom control panel. Just ping either myself, again, Danielle, or Emily, and we'll do our best to support whatever concerns you have or challenges you're having in engaging in the conversation. You do have access to the chat box, so post any questions there. But your panelists will engage you however they feel most comfortable in taking questions and answering things from the audience. And lastly, post-session, you see on the screen, there is a little megaphone icon. That's going to be at the top right-hand side of your lobby when you leave this session. There's only 9 questions in our survey. It's super short, but it gives really great feedback to us and our presenters for future sessions to make sure that we're getting you the content you most are looking for. So please take a second to fill that out. Your feedback is so important to us. And with that, I'm so excited to pass it over to Melvette to get us started.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this panel of parent leaders who will share on their experience in helping to co-create and co-design a housing policy table. And so before we get started, I'm going to share my screen and want to welcome you to do a land acknowledgement with us. This is a way that we always enter into our spaces, acknowledging that the land that we are on does not belong to us. I think this is so important as we talk about land and housing and those who exist and live and move and breathe in these spaces. And so we want to acknowledge that the land that we are on here in Connecticut is the land of many indigenous peoples who have stewarded this land over many centuries and thousands of years, many who still exist and live on this land. We want to show gratitude that most of this land and much of it has been unceded land or land that has been turned upside down in treaties. And so we want to show gratitude and offer a moment of silence, understanding that the land that we live and play and work on does not belong to us. And so if you can just take a moment in your space to be silent. Thank you for that. And if you're interested in learning more about the land that you live on, I've put a link in the chat, native-land.ca, where you can learn about the indigenous peoples whose land you live on. I live in Danbury, Connecticut, and so that land is the land of the Pequannock, the Wappinger, the Paugussett, and Lenape peoples. And so interesting activity that you can do at a later time. So I bring you welcome from the National Parent Leadership Institute. I am a policy and capacity building consultant for the National Parent Leadership Institute. Many of you may know me in my state work. I'm working at the Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity, and I also lead the Parent Leadership Training Institute here in Connecticut. But for those of you who are not familiar with the National Parent Leadership Institute, also known as NPLI, NPLI is a nonpartisan, parent-centered, anti-oppression organization that partners with parents and other community leaders to increase racial equity in policy and practice, advance a healthy democracy, and improve child outcomes through the civic engagement of families. And then for the Parent Leadership Training Institute, that is celebrating 31 years. We're excited that we're probably going to be launching 7 to 9 cohorts in January. But PLTI is an equity curriculum created in 1992 by the Commission on Children. That work continues to this day and spans across 69 communities nationwide. Here in Connecticut, we've had about 18 communities implement PLTI. It is an equity curriculum. It is a civics curriculum. It is the thread of racial equity that weaves through both the phases of this family civics curriculum that really centers itself on personal leadership and helping parents understand how local and state government works. So it helps them build a democracy toolkit. The curriculum includes race and equity materials and language to strengthen civic skills, knowledge, and participation of diverse parents as civic leaders. The reason why I bring this to the forefront is that every one of our panelists today, including myself, is a graduate of the Parent Leadership Training Institute. So shout out to all of my alumni from Danbury, class of 2004. And as many of you know, Melville Charitable Trust is one of the sponsors of the conference, but also they are the sponsors of this housing table, of this parent policy housing table. And so we want to really share a little bit of context for some of you who might not be as familiar with Melville Charitable Trust. They are the nation's largest philanthropy group focused on ending homelessness. The trust is always focused on systems change, policy, and advocacy aimed at reducing homelessness and housing instability. And in 2021, we began with them to examine the root causes driving people into homelessness and the populations most impacted, which were Black, Indigenous, and Latino, Latina, and Latinx people with extremely low incomes. And so drawing on what they learned through data analysis, conversations with stakeholders, and imagination sessions, in 2021, the Trust launched a new grant making strategy for equitable results to intentionally focus on the conditions that drive people into homelessness and housing instability and the people most impacted. And so what I would share with you today is that back in 2021, early 2022, we started this work with Melville in that process of being partners and understanding the voice of stakeholders, particularly people with lived experience. And part of that work that Melville is doing is helping to understand people how to shift power, how to include the voice of people who are experiencing these things, particularly housing insecurity and homelessness or being unhoused. And in what spaces can those voices be elevated in order to create change? And so NPLI worked together with Melville to come up with a strategy that we are calling this parent housing policy table. And so this process has been co-created and co-built, co-designed with the parents on our panel. And so I'm going to ask Janine if she can start to pin the panelists and myself. I'll do introductions of our panelists, and then we'll get started with some of the questions that I know all of you want answered. So in no particular order, our first panelist that I'll introduce is Stefan Palmer. He's a business leader with his community at heart. He's a father of 5, and he's raising his 8-year-old son full-time at this time. He is the founder and executive director of Youth on Fire, Inc. His passion drives him to fight for community change, family stability, entrepreneurship, and fatherhood throughout his state, throughout his city, and I'm going to say also nationwide. A little birdie told me that Stefan is going to be in DC, maybe at the White House coming up soon. Using his ability to build relationships and create stable teams and develop a vision to bring action anywhere needed, Stefan has been a great partner in this work. He's a leader, and he believes it's crucial always to learn, to listen, and to motivate others around him to the next level of their field of work. Also joining us today as a parent panelist is Alexis Alima Dwyer. She's a parent leader, and she's a women's empowerment coach dedicated to transforming the legacy of families by improving their quality of life and creating a generational legacy each of them can be proud of. As an advocate for positive change within her community, Alexis serves on various community boards, including the Public Safety and Quality of Life Committee, the Asylum Hill Neighborhood Association, the Friends of Sigourney Square Park, and also our state's 2Gen Advisory Board as a parent leader. Alexis empowers single mothers via her YouTube channel and social media platforms to thrive along their journey of motherhood and as well as their life journey with practical steps that will allow them to build strong relationships with their children, achieve their goals, and pursue their God-given purpose. And finally, Camille Smith, our final panelist. She currently works as a family liaison at Farm Hill Elementary School in Middletown, Connecticut. In her career, she's worked as a paraprofessional and a substitute teacher with Middletown Public Schools, as well as being a proud graduate of the Parent Leadership Training Institute, Parent Supporting Educational Excellence, and People Empowering People, as well as Voices for Families. You can tell that she's an advocate and she is ready for change. She attended Middlesex Community College and St. Joseph College. And finally, Camille is an amazing mother and grandmother to 3 sons, 1 daughter, and 2 grandsons. She loves traveling to create memories and learn different cultures. She likes designing, planning, and organizing community and home events. So welcome our panel today, everyone. We're excited to have them here. And we're going to get started. We are going to get started. So this parent policy table that focuses on housing, again, was co-created with the idea to really understand how philanthropy can support parents who have lived experience in different areas, particularly this one in housing, and also how can philanthropy help to shift power dynamics between those who are governing and those who are governed, and particularly how can parents have voice in impacting policy. And so I would love to get right into it and ask our panelists a very important question. Why were you interested in participating in this housing policy table? I'm going to go straight to Alexis.
Hello, everyone. Growing up with a single parent, I saw my mother have multiple failed attempts in trying to purchase a home of our own, and living with relatives and being unable to obtain a co-signer from family members and friends, and not knowing the information that was available at that time that could have assisted her in the process. She had to work countless double shifts and as well as weekend living positions. just to make this a reality. And when it finally came to fruition, it came with a $3,000 monthly mortgage that she struggled to pay every month while having her 2 children in college. And just 3 years after that dream came to fruition, it was literally ripped from us due to the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis. Now we had to go to live with family members who were extremely reluctant to let us in. At that time, I moved to Hartford, Connecticut in hopes of finding employment and obtaining an apartment of my own as a new college graduate. And 2 months into the state, living with family members, it became extremely uncomfortable for me. So this expedited my search to look for an apartment. But lo and behold, due to my short residency in the state, short work history in the state, and unable to have a co-signer for an apartment, leasing offices were hesitant to rent to me. And due to these lived experiences of housing insecurity, I wanted to share my story of how housing insecurity affects families both mentally, emotionally, financially, physically, and even spiritually, and find a way that we can actually begin to make these changes in housing policies and locate information that actually will be readily available to us to assist us in this process so that we do not repeat the same patterns that pass down to our children and the generations after them.
Yes, thank you, Alexis. And Camille, why the housing policy table? Why were you interested in being a part of it?
So, as someone who has also navigated the challenges of homelessness, my motivation to join the housing policy, stems from a deep rooted desire to make effective and tangible change in the housing landscape. With my lived experience, it has equipped me with a unique perspective that is often missing in policy discussions. By immersing myself in nuance of fair housing policies and relatable procedures, I'm able to bridge the gap between theory and practice. My goal is not to keep abreast of the latest developments, but to actively participate in shaping them. I believe that by acquiring the necessary skills and knowledge, I can effectively represent and advocate for those who are often overlooked or unable to voice their own concerns. This is more than just about me sitting at the table. It's about shifting the power, the dynamic, to ensure that the voices of the most affected and that are not heard and are considered in the creation and implementation of housing policies. My willingness to participate is a step towards creating a more inclusive and equitable system that acknowledges and addresses the realities of those who have experienced homelessness.
Thank you, Camille. Thank you. We appreciate that. And we appreciate the thought that you put into answering that question. So thank you so much. And then, so now, Stefan, tell us, why were you interested in participating in a housing policy table?
Well, with my work through Youth on Fire, it has me on the ground level working with residents within Hartford, Connecticut. I had several families come up to me asking me about eviction processing, how to deal with landlords that were not repairing units, how to get help from the city that they live in, which is Hartford, Connecticut, how to go down to City Hall and fill out a complaint form to begin to get the city to give them help to get the landlord to fix their units. So when the opportunity came across my desk to learn the proper ways to deal with things, learn how to do it, not only in your local city, but statewide, it was a win-win. It gave me the knowledge I needed to give to the families that I were already working with and connected to within the city. And it just allowed me to have a voice, not only in my state, but nationally.
Thank you, Stefan. And so you kind of just started to creep in a little bit on my next question. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate that all of you decided to be a part of this work. Initially the work began when we did some focus groups for Melville Charitable Trust to really understand what was important to people who had experienced, being unhoused or experienced housing insecurity, or some time in their life engaged in, supports that were provided through maybe rental assistance, like Section 8 and things like that. And so this group is a nationwide group. So it's not just our parents here from Connecticut, but there are about 12 parents, 5 of them from Connecticut, and the rest in different states like Colorado and California, Ohio, and other states, who have come together and share this, knowledge and experience around housing and housing policy. And so I think some of the conversations we've had and we've continued to have over the past year or so is really, what's most important to you? What are the policy issues that you really want to see elevated, and where do you think that we can make change? And it's been a journey. And so throughout that journey, I would love to hear from you. I'm going to start with Alexis. I would love to hear from you on what you've learned or gained since you have been participating in this housing policy table. Learned or gained?
Okay, since participating at this housing policy table, I've gained an understanding of how housing policies and programs have affected my fellow parent leaders at the housing policy table. A few of them have shared their stories of how low-income housing programs have impacted their families in a positive manner to an extent by providing them a safe and stable housing. But at the same time, it has hindered them financially, because any small increase now puts the entire family at risk of losing their housing voucher, which will repeat the same cycle of housing instability. I also learned at our recent Connecticut convening at the Lyceum about budgeting and how the budget meetings take place. And when we did our budget activity with Deputy Commissioner Brandon McGee, we learned that even though a budget amount may sound extremely large in the beginning, once the money is allocated to its respective groups and programs and initiatives based on community needs, the money is not really enough to have the impact that each group intended on having. Yet the amount that is allocated can still make a change for a better community going forward.
Thank you, Alexis. Same question for Stefan. You started talking about what you learned, and that was part of, your reasoning for joining the housing policy table, right? To kind of take some of those learnings away, share it in community. But what do you feel you gained since being a part of the policy table? What have you gained?
Well, I gained the knowledge on what are the renter rights in Connecticut, where they can file to get repairs done correctly in Connecticut if the landlord is not holding his end of the lease. I've also learned if tenants can sue landlords for not repairing and raising rent without proper knowledge. I've also learned what landlords cannot do in the state of Connecticut by being part of this group. Learned the new tenant laws that came into place in 2023, learned about the eviction process, also learned about harassment from landlords as well as tenants, the do's and don'ts. So basically, I learned that the protocol, the steps, and how to apply them effectively so things can get done.
Thank you, Stefan. And Camille, what do you feel you've gained?
So for me, I have had the opportunity to attend a national low-income housing coalition March of this year in Washington, D.C.
Oh, the conference.
Yes, the conference. Yes. That with that experience, I was able to attend various breakout sessions. In one of the sessions, I learned about some sections and policy which I never knew about, like the Save Section 9 movement of New York, which supports tenants fighting the privatization of housing, which I was unfamiliar with before prior attending this conference.
The privatization of public housing.
Yeah. So as I said, I was able to learn that. Also at that conference, I was able to learn about the Section 3 policy, which I've never heard anything about before. And under that policy, it guarantees that employment and other economic opportunities created by the federal financial assistance for housing and community development programs should, if possible, be directed towards low and very low income persons, particularly those who are recipients of government support.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great for us. We went down to Washington, D.C. to attend the National Low Income Housing Coalition Conference last year. And it was, or was it this year? I think it was this year. Yes. It felt like it was so long ago. But I think what was great was to interact and engage with people from different states, and also kind of take forward some of the learnings that we had in our monthly meetings, and see how that did apply to policy concerns from other families and other states. So it was interesting, and we were so impressed by the leadership of the NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority Tenant Association, and their persistence to ensure that their voices were heard there, sometimes in very robust and rambunctious ways, but definitely inspiring. We also learned, I just have to say, in the Parent Leadership Training Institute, how change happens, what the change process looks like, and effective ways to use your voice, right? And at some points, protesting is effective. At other points, really trying to sit down with leaders at a table is an effective way, right? And so I heard some of you reference the meeting that we had in Connecticut. We had a New York convening of those policy table members, all yourselves included, and two others. And we invited the Deputy Commissioner of Housing here in Connecticut, Brandon McGee, to come and sit down and talk with us. And we learned a lot from him. He offered us some challenges as well. I know Stefan will talk a little bit about that later. And so it has been an interesting journey. I think also one of the things that we've heard about the learning and what was gained is really a lot in that knowledge space, right? So you came to the table wanting to learn, also wanting to be advocates, and also wanting to understand how to move policy and policy agendas. And that really began with having a deeper understanding of how did the housing policy systems and systems in general start? How did they come to be? Why are we where we are today? And some of that we did through reading books and watching some videos and things like that. I want to give a shout out to The Color of Law. This was a book that we engaged in and spent some time kind of reading and dissecting and digesting. I think that was helpful for us as we continued our housing policy work, understanding that some of the change you wanted to see wasn't an overnight kind of change, but it was historical. There were systems put in place like redlining that caused us to have neighborhoods the way that we see them today, or that there are opportunities that historically some people didn't have, particularly Black, Brown, and Indigenous people didn't have because of land being taken away as it relates to Indigenous populations, but also communities that people couldn't live in or couldn't buy homes in because of redlining. And then we also, when we attended the conference, we got to see Matthew Desmond in action, and we also got his book, Poverty by America, and he signed books for us as well. So that was exciting, right? And so there's this learning and gaining that's happening in the policy table. And it's been exciting for me to be one of those facilitators in that process with you, to see how you're applying those learnings and how it's affecting how you look at policy, particularly housing policy. And so I guess my next question really is around what change in housing policy is most important to you, and how do you think the housing policy table can take action or will take action? I also want to say, going back to that conference we went to in DC, there was an advocacy day at Capitol Hill, which was exciting. We have the pictures, I have the receipts to prove it, where we were able to sit down with congressional leaders, not just our Connecticut parent leaders, but the folks who came in from California and Colorado got to sit down with their Congress folks and have conversations and really say, this is what's important to me. And so bringing all this forward and pulling it all together, we've been having discussions around policy. And I'm wondering individually, what is the change in housing policy that's most important to you right now, you personally, and how do you think the policy table can take action? I'm going to start with Stefan.
The change I would like to see is a smoother application process, not only for low-income housing, but Section 8 as well. There's a lot of road bumps that families run into that discourage them from applying. I just think that there was a one-stop shop where everybody shared data and the person can come in, apply for the application, and everything is already in the system. Once they get that social, will make things a little bit more smooth than sending family all over the city to collect paperwork when most of the data shows up with their social. It's all about sharing and breaking down.
Yeah, so streamlining processes so it's easier for families to engage and activate and access services. And so we talk a little bit about that in our 2-generational work in Connecticut, or our family economic mobility strategy, or our whole family approach to jobs, whatever you want to call it. One of the reasons why Connecticut started the 2-Gen initiative is to break down silos, right? And of agencies kind of, we're the agency to help children, we're the agency to help mom, we're the agency to do this, and really helping agencies to look together at the whole family. And so, so interesting, Stefan, you're part of that work in Connecticut. And so interesting that you're like, yes, we have to continue to break down the silos even within agencies and how they're sharing information. So thank you for that as well. Alexis, what change?
The change that's most important to me is the access to affordable homeownership programs and the opportunity to effectively transition from being a long-term low to middle income renter to a long-term homeowner. Even though that there are a few homeownership programs that are for low to middle income families, the information is not easily accessible and the requirements are extremely overwhelming. And this automatically puts families at a disadvantage and causes them to disqualify themselves. And then they immediately give up on that hope of having a piece of the American dream, which is homeownership. And I feel that the housing policy table can take action if we start to review some of these programs, write down a list of our concerns and our suggestions so that we can share them with these programs and come to like a partnership or an agreement on how we can have this information easily accessible and more widespread around communities. Because not everyone is tech savvy, even though they need stable housing and they want to create that generational legacy for their families. So maybe mailing this information out to families or having community meetings a couple times a year to let people know that these programs actually exist.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. It's so interesting. There's a lot of movement, Alexis, around, well, let's just talk about the economy, right? Like there's a movement for rental supports, rent stabilization, rental assistance. And there's also still a movement for, I guess, for housing stability, home ownership as a thing. And so I really wonder in this moment in time that with inflation, with the interest rates going up, with there being a low housing stock, I mean, there's not a lot of affordable housing, there are not a lot of homes for purchase. And even the homes that are available for purchase they cost so much, right? Like, so the housing prices have increased, rental prices have increased for both houses, if you're renting a house or if you're renting an apartment. Interest rates have gone up. So if I want to purchase a house, the price of the houses are high, interest rates are high. is home ownership still a thing? It really are people still looking to purchase a home? Are families still seeing that as a viable option with all of those?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because everyone wants, not, let me rephrase. A lot of people still want something they can pass down for generation after generation.
Mm.
And the fastest way to wealth is through owning property. You can live in an apartment and have family members raised in apartments and you only know apartment life. But what if one day that apartment building is now gentrified and you're moved out? Where do you go? So absolutely, people do still want something of their own that they cannot be put out of, and they know that they can pay that mortgage or it's completely paid off, and their children and their children's children will not have to worry.
Yeah. And okay, so going back to your own story about you and your mom, right? I can see that, right? I can see that there's for some families, for some cultures, owning land, owning a piece of something, having something to pass down, right? For legacy, so that I bought this house, I have this land, it's for myself, it's for my children, it's for my children's children. It's a thing still. And it is a way to gain wealth. I think sometimes in this conversation, and chime in if you will, Stefan, in this conversation around should I rent, should I purchase, we lose sight of what are the motivators, right? For me, I have to tell you, I'm still on the fence. I probably could buy a house if I want it, but I'm not sure if that's what I want, right? Because there's also the maintenance, the upkeep. And so sometimes people have to learn what it means in order to own a house, to have home ownership. It's not just I'm going to get a house. It doesn't work the same way as an apartment. There's upkeep, there's maintenance, there's thinking about, oh, if the furnace goes, what do I do then? Stefan, where would you say, families are? Alexis certainly has chimed up, and she has that personal experience because of her mom and her mom's desire to have something to pass down. And Alexis has grabbed hold of that and understands that this is a wealth building strategy for families to create legacy with property. But what about the families who aren't in that pathway, Stefan? I know you and I have talked a lot about those families who've made the decision, like renting is the thing for them. What are some changes that you've seen recently, maybe in legislation, that are helping renters, right? That are helping people to stay, I guess, housed in the renting space.
I know in June of 2023, Connecticut passed a eviction law, I think it's 998, to help renters stay within their homes and not go into homelessness, not get an eviction letter and then get put out the next couple of days, but they're given 30 days to appear in court to earn income to possibly pay off some of the rent where they can work out an agreement with the landlord. I think that was a very big step for the state of Connecticut because we were facing at large coming out of COVID. And a lot of people did not know what they were going to do as far as housing, especially families with children. So for the state to step up and not only put the eviction legislation in place, but also provide funding to help families stay with their home, I think was a very big step.
Thank you. And so I'm going to put a question in the audience because we've heard a lot from the parents, and intentionally that's why we're here, is to hear from our parents who are in this housing policy table. But for our audience, I would love to know, in your various fields that you're in, maybe some of you are in philanthropy, some of you are in government, in nonprofit. We've heard the why for these parents, why they chose to be a part of this housing policy table. I'm wondering today, why are you here? What is your why as it relates to housing policy? So I'd love to hear from some of our audience members. We want to bring your voice in. We want to know that you're out there. And if you want to raise your hand, if you want to respond in the chat, we would love to have you do that. What's your why in this housing space, in this housing policy space? Maybe what's the change that you're hoping for? And what is what is it you're hoping for families right now? What is it you're hoping for the field? Some of you might be builders. I don't know. And maybe you're looking for workers, and that's why you've attended the conference. So would love to hear from some of the folks out there. And we are comfortable in the silence, so we will wait for you. And I'm checking for hands. I don't see any hands. Looking for a little audience participation. Monica, please unmute.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am here because I'd like to consider myself a housing advocate. I am a former housing case manager that worked for a nonprofit, and I worked in prevention work, eviction prevention and security deposit work. I've worked with families who are facing homelessness and those who are looking to be rehoused. And when I was doing that work, one thing that seems to be constant is still lack of affordability. I tried to come to these events because I want to see change. I want to see housing affordability for everyone. What really resonated with me was panelist Alexis' comment about just the movement of going from one place and keeping going up. What I continue to hear sometimes when coming to these types of forums is that we stay down at the homelessness level, which is a very important level, but there are also low to middle income families who are struggling to stay in their homes as well. So what I would close with is the change that I would really like to see and hoping to see is that we do whatever we can in the state of Connecticut to look at housing models that are not necessarily the norm. I have worked with landlords and tenants. I've worked with folks who are under the threat of foreclosure. And the programming that is out there, as we all know, people are living in homes that are 50% more than their income. Where when I was working in these programs, they couldn't, to qualify for anything, it had to be a 30% number. And so my continued concern is that people are still, from when I was doing that work, which was 2017, that's when it ended. So it was 3 years, it was a state program and it got cut. And then COVID happened and they needed to reintroduce all of that stuff back again. The problem doesn't go away. And I think that I'll leave it at that. I would like to see some a newer. We need housing. We need better housing. We have to rethink how we do housing, and housing that's affordable for everyone.
Thank you, Monica. Stefan, you had a comment?
Yes, to piggyback off of what Monica said. I'm also currently working with the Child Defense Fund out of DC.
Oh, the Children's Defense Fund?
Yes, one thing that we spoke on last month and we're speaking on this month is different tiers for housing for teens, young adults, and elderly, and trying to come up with different brackets, because as people get older, they have families, their financial situation grows or gets smaller. These are things that need to be taken into consideration from housing that are not taken into consideration right now. So
yeah,
I agree with what you said. It does need to be taken at a large, more serious look.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. Monica, I appreciate your comments. And one of the conversations that we've been having, the parents in particular have been having at the policy table, is really looking at, you're right. Sometimes the efforts and a lot of the focus is on the unhoused. And we don't want to get into a space, or people are hesitant to get into a space of upward mobility, right? It's just like, okay, let's get the unhoused into something different. Let's get them out of the shelters, or let's get those who are unhoused into shelters, and then people in shelters into something renting. But there's no upward mobility plan that gets people from surviving to thriving, right? And that thriving scenario needs to be included in these housing policy conversations. And this is what we've been hearing from the parents. You know, part of building this table with Melville is this concept that, you know, philanthropy's role in all of this. Also, we call it the 4 Ps, right? So it's parent voice, the voices of parents, and people with lived experience and expertise being at the center. Philanthropy's role in supporting those voices, and also philanthropy's role in helping to shift power. That's the other P. And then the policy piece being probably the most important way that change can be created, right? So, and policy sometimes has to be enacted as law, right, in order for things to work. Some of it's happening on the local level, some of it's happening on the state level, but we need more movement on the national level to help affect lasting change for families in order so that they can thrive. I want to go to the chat. I appreciate people who have kind of taken a moment to think and now are putting questions or comments in the chat. Thank you, LaShawn, who shared, I am hoping for change in income guidelines. Yes. Housing for community and undocumented clients. Yes, that she works with, or maybe he, I'm not sure. I am worried about Section 8's new guidelines asking for utility bills when people are trying to survive. Absolutely, right. And we're taking note of those. Thank you for putting these in the chat as well. You got some affirmations there. And then from Karen, I'm a volunteer commissioner on our city's Housing Opportunity Commission. Karen, I'm going to ask you to put what city you're in. That would be great for us to know. Learning about the complexity as this crosses so many areas. Yes, transportation, healthcare, discrimination, gentrification, and so much more, ... I want to see affordability for everyone and have expertise in universal design, home modification, and lived experience as a person with a disability. Thank you so much. Karen, if you put your email in the chat, we'll definitely reach out to you. Oh, Wisconsin. Yes. Okay. We like to have folks from other places too. Thank you so much for sharing that. The way that this policy table kind of functions is that we meet monthly at least. I also want to note that this is not like a free volunteer situation for these parents. They are compensated for their expertise, their talent, and their time. So we really believe in this movement of change. Not gone are the days of volunteers. People still volunteer and do things like that. But when we're asking people to spend time with us, to engage with us in order to create change, we need to compensate them like we compensate other consultants. When we bring in consultants for their expertise, they are compensated. They're not volunteering. So I just want to share that with this housing policy table, the parents are compensated for their time. And so they do receive stipends. Also, I want to get to another question. I think that's important as we move toward future looking. I would ask, what are you looking forward to? So for our panelists, as we continue this work in this housing policy table, what are you looking forward to in the future work of the housing policy table? I'll start with you, Camille.
So I'm looking forward to become a change of reasoning, where I'll be able to have the option to speak on a more local, federal, state level. You know, I want to see the advantages when the power shifted. That I mean, like some of the power that is coming to the parents, it's shifted at the table, and you know we can become the change makers by sitting on housing policies and housing sessions, both at a local, state, and federal level.
Okay, so let me stop you there. Let's offer some clarification to folks who are listening. So when you're talking about shifting power, right? So we're talking about the housing policy table itself. And so do you see yourself on the housing policy table as a member of the housing policy table, then looking for opportunities on a local level to maybe be on a commission? Like when we're talking about housing sessions? Are you talking about like local commissions or zoning commission?
Like zoning committee, yeah, that's what I was gonna say, like, to be on the zoning committee here, that in the town that I live in, which is Middletown, Connecticut. So yeah, that's one of it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because we know one of the zoning commissioners, Shanae Fulton. Let's give a shout out to Shanae Fulton, who's in her second go around being a zoning commissioner. She was elected. She is one of the parent leaders that we do work with here in the state. She's a part of our 2Gen advisory board, and she's one of our co-chairs as well. And so there are opportunities for parents to be a part of, and anyone, right? You could run for zoning commission. You can, there are fair rent commissions in each of our cities and towns. And so that's one way that people can be a part of things. I'm going to go to Stefan. Stefan, what is it that you're looking forward to in the work of the housing policy table? What are you looking forward to in our future work? You're muted. There you go.
What am I looking for in the future work?
With the housing policy table, yes.
A deeper partnership with parents. I think with more parents at the table, it allows them to put better legislation in place that actually talks to the day-to-day living of families. I believe we're at a good start, but I believe we can expand it where parents are more able to help with the bills and legislation.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. And Alexis, what are you looking forward to in the future work of the housing policy table?
I'm looking forward to us completing the housing policy agenda that we've started to discuss at our last meeting. I think that once we start that, it will actually address the policies and the systems that have been put in place that are negatively impacting families. But in addition to that, each of us at the housing policy table are equipping ourselves to host a series of conversations that will be called community cafe trainings, and we'll be able to interact with other parents and bring their voice to the table to strengthen our work.
Yeah. And so that's some of what Stefan alluded to, right? So it's not that the table itself is going to expand, but your reach in community is going to expand, right? Because we've been on this journey for a while. So it's like a cohesive group of parents. And so as we build the policy agenda that we've already started, and I'll finish out the next month or so, we shared with all of you that there will be trainings where you can have a training on how to host a community cafe, which is a conversation in community where you bring people together, you talk about a particular issue, and then there are different conversations that are had, and you kind of come together and decide what actions to take. Community cafes, Stefan mentioned, getting more parents involved in legislation and how that works. So we're going to do legislative advocacy training for our housing policy table, as well as prepare them in this conversation, how to share out the policy agenda, how to look at bills, how to partner with legislators, and how to get more parents at the table on getting involved in public hearings. So that is a lot of the work that's about to happen. And I'm looking forward to it too. I'm looking forward to future growth, and also sending out good vibes and good energy to all of you, to all of our parents here, and the rest of the parents on the policy table for whatever your hopes and dreams are, however you see yourself in the future with you and your families. I want to open it up now, as we have about 6 minutes left. I want to open it up to questions from our audience if there are wonderings that you might have based on what you've heard, or maybe what you didn't hear and you want to know more about. I'm going to open it up now to our audience. Feel free to put questions in the chat or to raise your hand. And also, while we wait, just want to give a shout out to my colleagues who are in the space from the National Parent Leadership Institute, Janine McMahon and Hobson McCain. Hobson has been involved in the project for a while now, and Janine also joined over the past few months and has been doing this work with us and providing support to our parent leaders. One of the things that we find very important is also doing check-ins with our parents, and Janine does a lot of that with us, right? Because we're talking about parents who have had some experience. Not all the parents at the table are experiencing homelessness or being unhoused or housing insecurity, but some of them are, right? And so it's important to check in and make sure how people are doing. We're not doing case management. That's a question that comes up sometimes, but we're helping to provide support and directing toward resources, as well as really providing access and opportunity to do this work. So no questions. I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, here's one. Monica and Jenkins, where can we get information on these trainings, community cafe, or how to get involved with your organization? So, so I can give you my email address here. Okay, so that's my email address. You can shoot me an email and let me know that you're interested. And then also the community cafes haven't come out yet, but Partnership for Strong Communities is one of our good partners. And so once we put them out, we are hoping and believing that they will help promote them as well. So if you're on social media, make sure that you stay on social media, definitely on LinkedIn and Instagram and things like that. We'll put them out as well. And then you can also visit NPLI's website at parentswholead.org to learn more about what the organization does as it relates to parent leadership and capacity building. We do dual capacity building, so it's not just building the capacity of parents and families, but also building the capacity of organizations, so that they can work with families and engage them in creating change in systems. Anything else from our audience? Okay, well, we're glad to end just 3 minutes early. We thank you for attending the workshop today.
LaShawn is asking if it's like lead.
I see it. Thank you, Janine. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's like lead in DC. That's my final answer. But we'll definitely look them up. But email is in the chat. And if there are no other questions or wonderings, we're going to release you to your day, maybe take a break before the next workshop begins. Thank you so much, Janita Hayes, who's from our PLTI family as well. Shout out to the folks out there. Some of our Bridgeport natives. She's doing great work too, every place that she is. And we appreciate you. Many thanks to our panelists, Stefan Palmer, Alexis Lima Dwyer, and Camille Smith, to my partners at NPLI, Partnership for Strong Communities, and the Melville Charitable Trust. Big shout out to Becca Allen, who's our program officer and who's so supportive of this work that we are doing. Thank you so much and have a great day.